Context. Myself and another Twitch streamer by the name of Kitspy join forces to hunt monsters, have fun, and talk about random topics. Some serious, some hilarious, and some with a combination of the two. The following conversation took place over on my stream at twitch.tv/EarthbunderCharlie. And don't forget to spread the love by following Kitspy on her platforms on Twitch and YouTube at It's Kitspy. No, you're not listening to this at 1.5 speed. Or are you? Prime example, right? Did you watch the Ghost in the Shell movie with Scarlett Johansson as Major Motoko Kusanagi?
Yeah.
OMG. Like, I don't know what is happening. Like, Japan should have flipped every table at the announcement of that movie. Like, how can this be?
Japan can be pretty forgiving about that kind of stuff, though. They don't scream. They're not the type of people that scream, what is it? The word that got really popular.
The woke, DEI stuff, or?
No, it was, what's the word?
Inclusion? Oh wait, no, that's something else.
No, not the inclusion. It's another word where like you're taking somebody else's culture and you're like.
Or like whitewashing?
No, not whitewashing.
Cultural appropriation.
Yes.
Okay,
See, Japan.
We got there in the end. Okay.
Yeah, we got there. I have a friend of mine who she just recently had a kid, and she's white, her baby's white, and she's been here before, and I sent a cute little baby costume that was like a kimono, and she's a photographer, so I was like, oh, this would be great, newborn pictures and a little baby kimono thing for your son, and she was so afraid to take a picture of it and post it on her Instagram because she's like, a lot of photographers I know would scream cultural appropriation at me, and I'm like, in Japan, people don't care.
Wait, because what was the baby wearing? Because the baby was wearing a kimono.
The baby, I sent them a kimono from Japan, like a type of kimono, like a male kimono type thing,
right. Yeah.
From Japan, and she was so hesitant about taking a picture. I don't think she ever did, because she was just so worried about what the photographers around her would say.
Yeah, and when she posted it online,
Yeah, because at the time, I guess she had another photographer in the group that she was in, who did something similar but with an Indian garb, and the entire community just came at this person.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know.
It's so it's very extreme. And unfortunately your friend having that fear, that fear comes from a very real place, right? Because the chances are, if she did make the kid wear the kimono and she posted it on IG or whatever, I'm sure some of her circle will be fine with it, but she probably would get a lot of pushback, and it's quite unfortunate because it's clothing. Every person should be, as long as you're not making a mockery of the culture that is, but that's not what's happening clearly, so it shouldn't be an issue. I'm quite passionate about this as well because I also hate it. Like for example, some people ask me because I got dreadlocks, right? And some people will say, "Oh, do you think it's okay for a white person to have dreadlocks?" And I'm like, my friend, it's a hairstyle. It's fine. Anybody you can, just because you have dreads, I'm not going to see you as making a mockery. Unless you're wearing dreadlocks and you're trying to behave in the most stereotypically nonsensical black way ever, then that's a different discussion. But if you're just wearing dreadlocks because you like the look of it, you don't need to ask for permission. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. And the reason why this is extra sad for me is because, unfortunately, we live in a world where there are a lot of black people that don't agree with what I just said. There are a lot of black people that will be like, nah, if you're white, you shouldn't be wearing dreadlocks. It's like, where do we draw the line? Can they have cornrows? Can they have braids?
Well, that's another good point, too, is dreadlocks were also extended to Viking eras.
Exactly. It's not even just a black thing.
No, it's not. And I think what people forgot is that there is a thing called cultural appropriation, but did we forget cultural appreciation?
Exactly, yeah.
When Beyonce came over, or no, it was Beyonce and Gwen Stefani came over and really played up the Harajuku girl stuff. They, for a time period back in the early 2000s, they were all dressing in the Tokyo Harajuku style. Yeah. And Japanese people loved it. They were like, oh my God, these big stars wearing our stuff. It's so cool. Mm-hmm. So there's appropriation, and then there's, I think a lot of it actually just mostly comes from appreciation.
Exactly, yeah. People do forget that for sure. Yeah, it's quite unfortunate.
Yeah.
Very, very annoying. And I don't know if Vikings did it first or if Africans did it first. It doesn't even matter really.
I don't think it really does.
Yeah, even if we found undeniable proof that it did turn out to be Vikings, that doesn't change. it doesn't change. Who are the original Vikings? Are we going to look to English people? Like some of English people may be descendants of Vikings. Are we now going to turn to English people and ask them for permission to wear dreadlocks? Like probably not, right? You know, so it's just quite annoying.
I think at some point people just have to. Yeah, I think a lot of this did get overblown in the COVID era, though. And I think a lot of it was people had nothing to do at the time, and except for be online, and then when you go online, it's an echo chamber of just unhappy ideas. So I think that's where a lot of it came from, unfortunately.
And weirdly enough, like it's kind of like the fact that the fact that some people fight these battles about you can't wear dreadlocks. It's kind of like, as weird as it is, it's kind of like a sign of if this is the thing that is concerning you, that means that you're probably living in a pretty well-off place. You're probably doing okay in life, because if you are living in war-torn wherever, somebody wearing dreadlocks is not going to be your concern. You're going to be concerned about getting food, survival, not having a bomb dropping on your house or whatever, right? So weirdly enough, it's like these complaints, it's like a byproduct of what happens when you live in this culture that's very safe and coddled, and there's no external, like, it's not like Taiwan where, like, every so often China just decides to surround Taiwan with boats and remind us that we could invade you if we really wanted to, right? Like, Americans don't have to worry about that. People in the UK don't need to worry about that. France don't need to worry about that. And so all of these other complaints end up at the forefront.
It's really interesting, because I actually had a friend of mine who was dating a black girl, and he was a Japanese guy, and her family was huge into black culture and all that kind of stuff, and there's nothing wrong with that, sure, like, be proud of where you're from, and but they were so much so that, and these are Americans, like full-blown Americans, that when they left Okinawa, they didn't want to go back to America. So they decided to go to live somewhere in Africa. Right. They lasted all of but 3 months, and was just absolutely shocked by the difference in mentality from their ideal of what black culture is versus like the African counterparts of what black culture is.
Which part of Africa? Which country?
I think I can't even. It wasn't. I don't remember which part. No off the top of my head, but when they got there, they lasted about 3 months before they hightailed it out of there. Right,
but because it was too different, it's not what they expected it would be.
Well, I think that, and I also think that the ideals that they carried, living in like a place like America, they found that a lot of people there didn't share the same beliefs. Yeah, and they were just really shocked by that.
They got a wake up call. It's like when some people say, I'm sure maybe some people in the chat agree or have heard this a lot. It's like, some people in the West, they'll have the belief that black people can't be racist. And then maybe you go to Africa and then you're like, holy shit, this is not true. Black people can definitely be racist. You don't even need to go to Africa to know that black people can be racist. It's like, this is, so I can imagine a wake up call being along those lines, right? Where it's like you just assume that everybody with a certain skin tone is going to agree with you, especially if you present yourself as like a black ally or whatever, right? It's like, well, no, there's black people that can be racist, there's black people that are conservative and on the left and have different opinions. Like, it's not this fantasy world that you've painted in your mind.
In less than 2 weeks, I can watch a group of Americans being culture shocked. Yeah, that's basically what happens. Africans hate black people from America. Yeah, I've heard that too.
Some. Well, actually, no, not. I wouldn't say that they hate. I just think that. Not that I think. I know that black Americans and black Africans have a tumultuous relationship, is what I'd say. A lot of them do get along, but they treat each other in ways that perpetuate certain stereotypes. For example, some Africans think that black Americans are lazy, and then some black Americans think that Africans are not as intelligent or primitive or come from it goes both ways. The hatred that is flung between the two goes both ways.
Hey Kit, have you heard about the shitstorm happening in Assassin's Creed
hate is
Shadows?
A strong word for sure. Sorry.
Female super wrestler got revealed and people are losing their collective minds over it. Oh, Assassin's Creed is going to be interesting. I'll
Yep.
definitely be playing it for the memes, but yeah. I mean, I'm not going to say that it might not be a good game, like a fun game to play, but it is pretty interesting some of the historical choices
Yeah.
that they're making for that game
With the
for sure.
Yasuke situation, right?
Yeah, Yasuke situation.
Yeah.
Because I
I.
mean, like I actually, because there was a Black Samurai anime that came out, and
Afro
that
Samurai.
was yeah, that one
Yeah.
wasn't that was pretty fun. So
Yeah.
like, it has been done before, but I think the problem I think that a lot of Japanese people had wasn't the fact that he was black. It was more of that they were trying to push this narrative that this was the real historical truth. When there are
Right.
some historical elements that are true,
Yeah.
but not to the extent that they were making it
Yeah.
to be true.
To my knowledge, it's still up in the air whether he was a samurai or a retainer, right? And there's no
Yeah.
actual uh, concrete evidence for on either side. Last I checked, I could be wrong.
Yeah, that's pretty much where they're at this point. And what ended up happening was the guy that they used as a source material,
Was not
he
Japanese,
they
right?
yeah, he's a white guy who lives in Japan, and he created this series of Yasuke,
Right.
and he ended up he ended up becoming one of the biggest contributors in the Wikipedia page, and he was a big consultant on the whole thing.
Yeah.
And it turns out that he was basically citing his own work to sell his own
Oh
books.
no, that's a hot mess right there.
And so there was just a lot of insensitive stuff that they did.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of effort to offend Japanese people, because Japanese people don't get offended that easily about stuff like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for them to offend even Japanese people, it was pretty crazy
I think
with what
one
they did.
interesting thing about this as well is that obviously I can't verify this, but I would be curious to know because the Assassin's Creed thing is part of a part of a greater conversation about this anti-DEI push in video games, right? Which is definitely more so a Western thing. And so
Hmm.
my concern or my what I wonder is, I'm sure there's a lot of Japanese people that are speaking up about it, but sometimes I wonder how much of the like it could be quite easy for a person to post something on Reddit and be like, I'm a Japanese person, I live in Japan, and this is what we think. Let me tell you what the Japanese think about this game. But
Hmm.
we don't know if that person could just be grifting as a Japanese person. They're actually a Western person and they're just sharing their hatred, but they're trying to paint it as if they're Japanese to give it more, to give the critique more validity. You know, sometimes I wonder, obviously I can't prove it, but I just think that that could be somewhat what's happening as well because I've seen less crazier things happen. You know,
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
just not sure. I'm. I think in the case where like if people have a problem with the portrayal of Yasuke and like if it is the case that Ubisoft is it's Ubisoft, right? Yeah. If it is the
Yeah.
case that Ubisoft is clearly mishandling the history and trying to portray their version of Yasuke as real history, that's like super valid reason to boycott the game and to not like it, right? But I think for the people who are complaining, saying that like you shouldn't have a game set in a country where the protagonist is not from that country, that is a very big can of worms because now we would have to start looking at other media, whether it's movies and books, like any story where there's a film or the story is set in a country. Do we now say that, like, if you have a story where it's set in Bangladesh, does every story from Bangladesh need to have a Bangladeshi main character? Like,
Hmm.
the answer should be no, because it's a narrative. Right? Like, you should be able to tell any story you want, really, obviously within reason, and as long as you're being respectful. And so I just wonder. And another thing about Assassin's Creed is that it's a dual protagonist. It's Yasuke, and it's also the Japanese lady too. So it's not like it's just Yasuke. So I don't. I think that if we construct a world where we can only have main characters that are from the country that the story is set in, that just limits the kind of creativity and the kinds of stories we can tell. And I'm just not sure how I feel about that. But I think there's other reasons to critique the game, and for
Yeah.
example, the history thing that you mentioned. Then I think that's more valid for me, in my opinion.
Well, I think for me, Assassin's Creed, from the historical, their past games, they, not to say that they were trying to portray somebody specifically accurately from history, but, like, they stuck to what country they were based in. They had the people from that country, like a character from that country being portrayed, where they completely changed that up in Assassin's Creed. I think like Yasuke would have done better as maybe like a side character, and they could have focused on a main Japanese samurai who, and then introduced Yasuke as like a side character, as a fun part of history. But I think it came out in an era where people were already so sick and tired of the whole DEI initiative that nobody can look past the Yasuke thing. And to be honest with you, I honestly do think that was probably a big reason why they picked Yasuke. Like, I would agree that Yasuke is an interesting story. A black samurai in feudal Japan, that's a crazy cool story. But I think the timing of it and just the way the gaming industry at the time was going with the whole woke and DEI stuff, I think that's why they included it, and that's where the obsession, like people being upset about it came from.
Yeah. It's like it's a result of the current climate. Like the climate has also dictated the response to it. Because perhaps if this game came out 10 years ago, perhaps it would be a bit different, right?
Oh yeah, Gio also said, I think AC Shadows would not be this controversial if the devs didn't push that the game is historically accurate. They should have just said it was pure fiction. Yeah. That was another thing too, is that they were so proud of the fact that it had been like, as you know, historically accurate and stuff like that. And
that's the thing. I was, maybe I just haven't seen them say it. I didn't know that they were claiming that it's meant to be historically accurate. I didn't know that. I haven't seen that being said by them. I would be shocked if they tried to say that, because that should be obviously a bad move. Especially if one of the characters is is the Kunoichi character, is she also meant to be a historical figure, or is a fictional character?
She's a fictional character, but I think a lot of it was surrounding Yasuke. In the beginning, they were very much trying to push the narrative that it was, if not close to historically accurate, that he was at least close to historically accurate. And they just really held on to that for a really, really long time.
Yeah.
But like I said, I keep telling people, I think it's unfortunate that it went the direction it did, because it could potentially actually be a really fun game to play. And if I do play it, I want to separate the controversy surrounding it versus the gameplay itself.
The game is not even out yet. Keep this in mind. It's because he's black. Yeah, it's not out, and I do think that, I mean, Ubisoft didn't do themselves any favors in how they treated it, but I do think that sometimes some communities and some people, the kind of pushback that they levied out, I think was a bit extreme, and it does sometimes feel like the pushback was extreme in that way because the character was black. And sometimes I wonder, like, would the pushback have been just as visceral if it was the similar kind of situation, but it wasn't a black character? Like, let's say Japan had a fictional, not fictional, let's say there was a rumor that there may have been a French samurai in Japan or something, right? And then Ubisoft decided to make this game. I think in that alternate reality, there would probably still be pushback, but I think it being Yasuke and it being in an age where the anti-DEI thing is a big thing, sometimes I do get the feeling that, like, him being a black character multiplies, it enhances the rage versus if he wasn't a black character. But I do acknowledge that Ubisoft didn't do themselves any favors. And so sometimes it's hard to separate, like, is the rage purely because Ubisoft fucked up in many ways? Or is some of that rage also because some people just see black character must be DEI? Like, there are definitely corners of the internet who have that perspective.
I think it's a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B.
Yeah.
I think, you know, because I remember when I was playing Assassin's Creed back in the day, I was like, man, it would be so cool if they created a Japanese arc, because Japan has such a cool history.
Yeah.
And I was highly disappointed when they did come out with this and they decided to focus on Yasuke. And I think I personally would have been disappointed regardless of whether it was a French guy or a black guy, just because I wanted them to tell a Japanese story. Finally we get a story in Japan, and we're hearing about this when there's a lot of cool feudal Japanese people that would have fit the storyline so well. but I do think there are corners of the internet that people do get upset anytime they see a black person and they're like DEI, and it's like,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
well, you know. So I
Right.
think it is a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B for sure.
But I mean, I'm not a big fan of Assassin's Creed anyway. I don't imagine the game is going to be good. I think that Ubisoft is, I don't know if you played Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, but like, there's a reason why the towers in Rebirth are referred to as the Ubisoft towers, because everybody knows Ubisoft just makes these very repetitive games that have the same, like, go to this area, unlock this quest, and report back to me, but you have to reveal the map by talking to the five samurai from across the universe. Like, I
Yeah.
imagine that it's not going to be that great of a game anyway, regardless of Yasuke or whatever, you
I
know.
think people would be equally weirded out by an Indian samurai. No, I agree with you. I agree with you.
Yeah.
I think it would have been equally strange.
But the true analogy is if there was an Indian samurai in Japanese history, or if there was an Indian figure who may have been a samurai, who may have been close to Nobunaga, or who may have just been Nobunaga's sword carrier, right? I think in that world, the real question is, if that is the world that we have, where there is historical accounts of there being an Indian samurai, if that game is now made, the question is, would the Indian have the same visceral reaction to the black person? I think you're probably right. I think there would be, but I think it's interesting when you swap out the race of this of this historical figure. If it's black, okay, one outrage. If it's Indian, one outrage. If it's a Dutch person, maybe a different outrage. If it's I don't
Oh
know.
shit, that was my bad.
If it's like a Korean person, maybe a different outrage, right? I think that the outrage increases or decreases depending on the ethnicity of the character. In my opinion.
I think it's mostly the whole thing with the game industry being so steeped in DEI and having games being ruined by choices purely made in the name of making more of them diverse. Yeah, I could see that. I mean, it's so hard because I think along with racist, Nazi, fascist, like all these terms, I feel like DEI has also started to reach a level of buzzwordiness that gets slapped on a lot of things. So it becomes really hard to distinguish what truly is a problem with woke DEI and what is just being included for the sake of the story and now being called DEI agenda when
Yeah.
it really wasn't in the first place. And I
Yeah.
think that line is definitely getting muddied. I think with Assassin's Creed Shadow, I feel like it was more in that line that I do think that they truly thought Yasuke was a cool story arc, but I think the thing that fucked up the devs for Assassin's Creed was they pushed so hard in the beginning of like this being
Accurate.
pretty accurate of a historical, like they were really presenting something here when in reality they could have just said it was a fictional story that
Yeah.
they speak. And I think that's what got them in trouble more than anything. How much do you think living in Taiwan away from like England and what you know has molded your thought process of the world and how you like, because obviously, you're out of your bubble. You're living in a culture that's not like, well, you're probably used to it now, but it's very different from what you grew up in.
Yeah.
How much do you think your worldview has been shaped from this experience?
Quite a lot, I would say. Definitely. Even it didn't even need to just be Taiwan. I think because I've been out here for like 8 to 9 years now. I think if I had lived anywhere for that amount of time away from home, I probably would have changed in very similar ways because you're just forced to engage with different culture, different language, different way of life. So yeah, it's definitely changed a lot. If you're asking like how it changed, I've definitely become more understanding of the cultural reasons behind why somebody may make a certain decision that perhaps 7 or 8 years ago I would have looked at that decision like from the outside looking in thinking you guys are crazy, that's not the way you should do it, and I would be way more judgmental. But I'm a lot more understanding of, oh sorry, not understanding, I'm a lot more accepting of the reasons why people behave in certain ways or do certain things. It doesn't mean I have to agree with it. I can still disagree, or I can still think that, oh, maybe this way of doing X thing doesn't provide as great of an outcome. But but I'm a lot more patient with it, and what's the word I'm looking for? Just a lot more patient with it. And I do think my experience of being a teacher for so long, you kind of have to, as a teacher, you need to exercise a certain level of patience and understanding and all of these things, right? Otherwise, you're probably not going to be a great teacher. So that plays into it as well. I don't know if that answers the question directly, but in short form, yes. The answer is yes. A lot of things have changed in terms of what I think.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that.
I'm guessing it's the same for you as well, right? But it might be different because you born there and then left and then came back. But I think you probably are going to be that maybe there's an alternate reality where you stayed in America and that person is probably going to be very different to who you are now, right?
Yeah, I mean, I did spend 6 months backpacking Southeast Asia, so I got to see a little bit outside of like what my norm is. But I think growing up in Japan and growing up in America, like a good example is when foreigners come to Japan and immediately call something racist, when in reality there's a deeper cultural reason why Japanese people act the way that they do around foreigners. And it has nothing to do with racism sometimes. Some people are racist, don't get me wrong. But there's like a different level of understanding that I have for certain things. And a little bit more patience, I think, of being like, okay, well, understanding that people's experiences are different and why they think. Like for me, so I actually had this discussion with a Gen Z the other day because I said the word retarded. And I was like, when I was a millennial, retarded was a word that was thrown around all the time and it had nothing, it was not even there was no tie to, it being a derogatory. People. Yeah, the actual, like it had nothing to do with that, right? And I think sometimes words extend the original meaning. And so for me, words like that aren't a big deal, but for now it is. But now, so sometimes like I still say it and it like freaks people out, but
Can I ask, do you have the same, just out of curiosity, do you feel the same with the F word in terms of like in relation to gay people?
I mean, I used to say that stuff all the time, but it had nothing to do with, it was just a word, like I never really used words like that to begin with. Like I would say something's gay.
Right.
Like, oh, that's gay. I never really used like the F word or like the N word. Any slur words I never used.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Not part of your vocabulary.
Yeah, it was never really a part of my vocabulary. Like if it was in a song, I'd sing it, and I still do. Like if it's a lyric in a song, then I'm just like, I'll say it. But but and even if I did say it, I would never say it in a way that it would, because I think, like when, to me, racism is based off of like being a Japanese person living in America, there was a lot of times where other people would apologize for something somebody else said, and I never took it in a negative way, because I didn't feel that their intention was for it to be a negative thing. But there were other people that would say something about me being Japanese in some derogatory way where I could clearly be like, okay, this guy is being racist. And so like taking a step back and analyzing that situation and stuff like that, I think was really important to me. And it's really unfortunate too, because there's a lot of interesting conversations that I feel like we could have about this, but I also am because we're both streamers. And things can easily get taken out of context. I always worry about opening up certain topics, but
this is definitely one of them. I agree.
There are so many different ways to view the world. And just because somebody sees the world in one way doesn't necessarily make it wrong, even if it doesn't agree with you the way you've been conditioned and brought up to see the world. And I think to demonize people for that is something that America has been doing recently. And I find that to be so morally wrong.
But do you think, for example, right, I remember when I was teaching at one of the kindergartens, one of the Taiwanese teachers, like the co-teachers, I just finished a class and we're basically just having chit chat while we're getting the kids' lunchtime food ready. and she saw me eating rice, right? The Taiwanese teacher saw me eating rice. She's like, "Oh, Teacher Charlie, you eat rice? Do you like rice?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm from England, but oh, sorry guys,
Oops, sorry.
I wasn't
No,
paying
that was
attention."
me.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I'm
oh,
not
okay,
paying.
okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
it was me.
thought it was me. Yeah, she's like, "Oh, you eat rice?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I mean, I'm from England, but people in England eat rice. My family's Nigerian. We also, Africans, we eat lots of rice." And she's like, "Oh, I didn't know people in the West. I didn't know. I thought you guys just eat burgers." And I said, I remember looking at her, thinking, like, I was waiting for her to laugh, because I'm thinking, you must be joking. Like, this must be a giant bit, right? And you're gonna laugh in any moment and say, "Only joking," But she didn't. She's like, and I asked her, "Are you serious?" She's like, "Yeah, I thought in America and England, like, you guys don't eat rice, you just eat burgers." And I remember I had to, like, staunchly tell her, like, I mean, I know. And the thing is, for me, the reason why it was surprising wasn't just what she said. It's that this is a woman of age. This is not like a young 19-year-old who's never left Taiwan. This is like a older than me woman, right? And I remember, and the reason why I bring this up is because I think that sometimes a person's view of the world can be incorrect, in the same way that, like, her thinking that Americans only eat burgers, it's just incorrect, even though it might be her belief because of her limited knowledge of the world, right? So, like, what would you say to something like that? Do you think that kind of belief is something that we should just say, like, okay, she believes that Americans only eat burgers. It's not really a harmful belief. It's what she believes. Or do you think that, well, no, in this instance, you need to be told that Americans don't only eat burgers?
Yeah, no, I think it's good to educate people, but I wouldn't necessarily be mad or blame or be offended by that thought process. And I think it's because, like, to me, how much exposure of Western culture has she had? And when you look at a lot of, like, Western media, I think a lot of times you see Western media people eating burgers and, like, and I think there's a lot of stereotypes that Asians have for Westerners, and Westerners also vice versa have for Asians. So I think it really depends on what it is that she was conditioned to, or what form of what she has been exposed to in terms of, like, what Westerners are like. And I think when that was your only source, like, I can't judge her for what has been presented to her in her life.
Right.
But if she was doing that in a way of, like, being, I think, in bad faith, then I think there is definitely a conversation to be had. But I can't really blame somebody for not knowing something that they they were never exposed to in the first place.
Right.
Because, like, I see this a lot in Japan, where, in rural Japan, like, in the city, you see a diverse people. In Okinawa, because of the U.S. military, like 100,000 people of our population is Black, white, Mexican, because of the military bringing them here. Yeah. So Okinawa, places like Tokyo, they're used to seeing foreigners. But there are places in rural Japan where you don't like, outside of, because Japan is a very monoculture, right? Until very recently, with the rise of tourists and immigrants and stuff, Japan has mostly been Japanese people. Like 99% of people were Japanese.
Yeah.
So when you go to, like, rural parts of Japan and a Black person walks down the street and they get stared at, it's, they see it as, oh, they're staring at me because of racism. It's like, no, you stand out. You're a Black person in a sea of Japanese people and they've never seen you before. It has nothing to do with it being racist. You're just, it would be like if you were to drop a white person in a tribe in Africa who's never really associated with a white person before, they would get stared at. And I think it just depends on it. That's why I'm always strict about intent. Like, what is the intention of somebody's reaction to a certain thing?
Yeah.
Is it rooted in bad faith, or is it just rooted in not having the full picture?
Right.
And I think that's something that it really, being in Japan and having lived in America, that's a big thing that it taught me here. Like, one of the things that people always say is, when you're in a train in Japan, mainland Japan specifically, Japanese people will move away from foreigners. Now, foreigners automatically assume that that's racism. But if you talk to a Japanese person, yes, there are racist people who don't want to sit next to foreigners, but a lot of times so foreigners tend to smell very intense because they use really strong cologne, they use really strong fabric softeners, and Japanese people are not used to that, so their noses are very sensitive. So like I have a friend of mine who has asthma, and she had a foreigner sit next to her, and the perfume the cologne this guy was wearing was so strong. And so she had to move away, and she saw that the look on his face when she moved away, and she knew that he thought that she was moving because of his foreigner status, when in reality it was just his cologne. But she can't communicate that, right? Because she doesn't speak English.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of things that people do take out of context without understanding the situation.
But I think in those cases as well, right? It's like the reason why the person moves because of the cologne and the strong smell is totally reasonable, and it makes sense, right? Like you don't wanna torture your own nose, so of course it's a sensible thing to move. But I think where it gets tricky is that, like that is true. People move for those reasons, but the truth of that reason doesn't stop the hurtfulness that the person who got moved from feels. Even
100%.
Unless the Japanese person, let's say they spoke English and they said, hey, I see that you look like you're a bit upset. I'm just letting you know I moved because of the perfume. It's nothing to do. Like unless that happens, and the person can be like, oh, okay, phew, okay, it's cool. But most of the time that won't happen, right? So it's like it's kind of a weird dance where the mover has a good reason, but the reason doesn't make the bad feeling go away from the person who was moved away from.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
But I think that comes down to controlling your reaction to the situation. For me personally,
as long as the person isn't lashing out. Like if the person's like, "You moved from me, you're a racist piece of shit. Here, hold this drop kick." Boom. You know what I mean? Like if you're doing that, then good luck to you.
It's also the use of TikTok or like TikTok and Shorts to immediately call out a behavior that might have not actually been true in the first place. Because like that's another thing that I think happens a lot is people end up calling these behaviors out without understanding the full context and the picture. When they just assume something happened, so then they add that to the list of grievances that they have, when in reality that might have not been the case in the first place.
Yeah.
And so I think in both sides people are justified. Like that person is justified to feel that way.
Yeah.
But I think it depends on how they end up reacting to the situation. Because there's other things too. Like Japanese people tend to be very quiet. They're very like protective of their own space. They don't really like associating with people that they don't know. Especially Japanese people are really embarrassed by the lack of English that they know a lot of times. And so in order to avoid that situation of talking to somebody, they'll move away just so that they don't feel embarrassed in case somebody, because they know that foreigners do like to talk, or they see it a lot where foreigners like to engage in conversations, and Japanese people just aren't about that. So it is the part of I think a part of Japanese people automatically assuming that a foreigner is going to try to talk to them is probably wrong on the Japanese person's part, but there is a level of understanding that I have as to why Japanese people feel that way, and it has nothing to do with like, a lot of times it's just them being embarrassed for themselves because they can't properly communicate to that person if they were to be talked to.
But a lot of that stuff happens in Taiwan as well. So I'm definitely familiar. Like the story, like the train situation, I've had it happen to me quite often. So but yeah, you are right. The person being moved away from, we need to be more. We need to be mindful that the answer isn't, oh, they must be racist. Like there's probably a dozen other answers that could be the case before it's actually a racist situation. It could be, but oftentimes you're never going to know enough to ever know. So the best thing to do is just to learn how to take it on the chin and just keep moving. You know, like the staring thing. Like, when I first came, I mean, I'm not going to lie, staring still is annoying, but I understand it, and I get it. But sometimes it's double extra tricky sometimes when even when you get it and you know why something happens, when the knowledge of knowing why it happens still doesn't make it any less annoying, that's where it's like sometimes quite I don't want to say hard to deal with. It's just a unique problem, right? Because I know why people stare, but it doesn't make me not feel otherized. Sometimes you just want to exist as a human and not have attention drawn to yourself. You just want to live, but sometimes you go out and you're constantly reminded that you're different and that you stand out, right? Which, even though again, there's a reason why people stare, but and sometimes there's also the issue of like, especially when I've been living here for so long, the question becomes, at what point, like surely at some point in history, in my lifetime, the people staring will have seen enough black people that they no longer need to stare. And sometimes I wonder, is that day ever going to come? Like surely it must do, right? With tourism increasing and
I think at some point it will.
Yeah. And that's where it becomes like kind of annoying, where it's like, I've been here 9 years now. You must have seen a black person before to the point where you don't need to stare. But maybe we just need more time, maybe 20 years, right? But yeah, my point is that the knowledge of why something happens doesn't always make the feeling not feel shitty sometimes.
I think so I had this one experience. I used to work at this place called Home Depot, and I had a guy come in once, and I was a cashier at the time, and he was super. Hold on, let me shout you out in chat, thank you. Way you can.
Oh, Zamo did it. Thanks, Zamo. Oh,
thank you so much.
The bot said, please do not send links.
Yeah, I got
Wait, is
you.
That my bot? No, that can't be my bot.
Bender, no, it's mine.
Oh.
My bot's pretty strict.
Right.
But I had one person who refused to go to my line because I was some sort of Asian. He found out I was Japanese, and I guess his dad like fought in the war, and he was like really against Japanese people.
In America? Is this in America?
Yeah. And this happened a couple times actually. It wasn't just a one-off occasion. And especially when they found out, there was one guy who got really upset when he found out I was Okinawan. And I was like, well, you clearly aren't up to date on what actually happened with Okinawans. Yeah. They were thrashed in the war thanks to the Japanese. But there was I remember my friend was actually more upset about, or my coworker was more upset about the situation than I was. And I think this, for me, like I said, I think there comes the point where I'm like, you know, when that happens to myself, I think to myself, well, this guy's being an asshole for just being an asshole. And is me reacting to this going to change him being an asshole? Probably not. And am I ever going to see this person again? No. Does this person mean anything to me? No. Does this person's opinion mean anything to me? Absolutely not. And so I think I used to be a very self-conscious person who used to really care about what everybody thought of her. And one day at some point, I just realized that I only care about the opinions of the people that I've learned to trust over the years. And so I don't know what happened in my brain, but like when I run into situations like that where people take a racist turn on me, I'm just like, this is just a random asshole I met throughout the day, and I just don't I don't care enough about this person's opinion for it to affect me in any sort of way.
Yeah, I think. Oh no, continue. Sorry.
No. Yeah, and so it's just kind of an interesting, because I used to get really, really upset about that type of stuff, and then my perspective just completely shifted when I realized that.
Yeah.
I don't know this person.
Yeah, I think. I think that is the more healthier and safer way to deal with these things, because you're right. You most likely will never see that person ever again, and sometimes it may be difficult to just walk away, but. Maybe it's difficult in the moment, but when it's all said and done, you can look back and be like, yeah, you know what, I made the right decision. I don't owe that person anything or whatever, right? I think that's a totally valid, better thing to do most of the time. But I also think that, like, that's option A, walk away, usually healthier. But I think option B that sometimes people do, which I sometimes do, wait, let me not lie, let me say oftentimes do, is that I think some people give themselves more of a response. Some people feel as if they have a responsibility to educate whenever they can, even though they may not ever see that person again, in order to do their part to not make that behavior repeat and be harmful to somebody else, right? Example, I won't get into the whole story, but there was a situation not too long ago, maybe like a year ago, where basically I was in a 7-Eleven and there was a family inside, and the family had a child. The child looked like 9 or 10 years old, and they were eating a banana, right? And when I walked past the child, I remember in my peripheral, the child was looking at me, and the child said, "Ooh, ah, ah, ooh, ah, ah," right? And I walk past, and now the child's eating the banana. So in my head, I'm thinking, okay, maybe I happen to walk in the 7-Eleven while she's eating a banana while she's making monkey sounds. So the first time I heard it, I just walked away. Like I walked to the back of the store to pick up what I wanted to buy.
Right.
And then I realized that, oh shit, I wanted to pick up something else from the front of the store near where the family and the kid was, right? And mind you, when I was at the back of the store, I was at the back of the store for like 2 minutes looking for the drink that I needed, and she wasn't making the sounds at all. Like, so I walked in the store, she saw me, she looked at me in the eyes, and she made the sounds, and I went to the back and she stopped making the sounds. Then I went back to the front to pick something up, and she looks at me again and does it. Same thing. And her parents were right next to her. So I remember, in that moment, I remember thinking, I can choose to just walk away because I'll probably just never see these people again. But I wasn't even upset with the child. I was annoyed that the parents were watching this play out and they didn't say anything, right? So I said to them, I said to the mom just like this. I just said, word for word, I said, you probably should let her know that that's not really okay, right? And as soon as I said that, the parents went wild. They were like, she's just a child. She's just eating a banana. Of course she would make monkey sounds. She's not trying to be. And I literally, like, I didn't have my hands up like that, but I was like super shocked. Like they just came full on, flipped the lid. And I said, listen, and I was being just as calm as I am now. I'm like, listen, I understand that she probably doesn't mean it in this way. I'm not trying to call you anything. I'm not trying to call you bad parents. I'm just saying that another person may do this to another person, or when another black person is around, and they might be more aggressive, or they might be more upset by it. So I'm just letting you know how it could be received. Like, that's what I'm trying to let you know. So you might want to let her know that, like, some people in this world, some black people might get offended when this happened. That's what I'm trying to tell you. And they're just going crazy. They were not trying to hear it. And I remember, like, we got into a big shouting match, and then I just left, right? Now, I don't know what transpired after. Maybe they went home maybe they went crazy on me, but then maybe they thought about it and they went home and they actually did speak to the child. Or maybe something positive happened. Or maybe it didn't happen. But I think some people take it upon themselves to, like, do what little they can to potentially cause some change in the world. Because if we don't, then these small changes of positivity, the chances of them happening just reduce, you know. But I agree that, like, the healthier thing to do for my own peace of mind may have been to just walk away. I'm probably not going to see these people again. But I just couldn't. I couldn't believe that shit. I'm like, and the fact that they flipped the handle so quick, that tells me that the mother knows. The mother probably knew that those sounds could be interpreted in that way. Because she wasn't confused. She wasn't like, why are you talking to us about monkey sounds? She wasn't straight away. She was like, she's just a child. She doesn't know. I'm like, no, that's how I know you know how this could be perceived. And so anyway, that story is just like a way of saying, like, I think both paths are valid. And sometimes I find myself more in the second path because, I don't know, maybe I'm just a glutton for punishment. Maybe that's what that means.
Yeah. I think for me, it really just depends on, in the moment, like, what's worth it to me, like, what's worth my energy at some points, because if I think there's a teachable moment and I think that these people are going to listen or whatever, then I might take the time. But I'm not going to fight every single person in the universe.
You don't got the time for that, you know.
I mean, especially in the case of Home Depot, like, I'm at work, there's people in line. If this motherfucker doesn't want to go through my line, then fuck him, right? Like, I'll just take the next person, and he can wait in line until somebody else is available, when he could have been checked out by me and left the store immediately. So at that point, it's like, well, all right, well, you know, whatever, that's fine.
Yeah.
So I think it really, like, if somebody came into the chat right now and blasted just racial stuff or just kind of, you know, absolute derogatory stuff, I would definitely put my foot down because I got to protect my chat too. Yeah. So I think it really depends on, I think my action comes from, well, number one, what am I protecting? Am I protecting myself or am I protecting somebody that I care about? And oftentimes if it's directed for me specifically, unless it makes other people really uncomfortable, I don't really put up too much of a stink unless it gets absolutely on a crazy level. Because I've had people come into my chat sometimes and makes, like, shitty ass comments about me being a woman or,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
something like that. And then it's like, well,
Yeah.
okay, bye, fuck you.
Yeah. Do you just like instant ban straight away, right? Or do you try? Do
Yeah,
you?
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I also think that I also understand. I mean, that yours was like a person to person interaction.
Yeah.
But another thing I've learned about being online too is like I don't know who these people are on the other side of the screen. Is it a bot? Is it a 12-year-old? Am I
True.
going to sit here and argue with a 12-year-old? Is this person mentally right in the head? I have no idea. Like, is this, you know, so especially being online and getting people coming in, it's just easier for me to just be like, all right, whatever, fuck off. You're not worth my time, rather than engaging in something that could potentially, you know, go too far in the emotional scale.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You did.
yeah,
You
I
did
think.
right by saying something, and as soon as they started shouting, it's time to leave. Yeah. Yeah. I left. You know, I was being as calm as I told this, as calm as I said what I said to them here is how I said it to them. And it's funny, right? Because it's very interesting. I'm sure you can relate to this as well. Like, you know, whether it's being a woman or being like having like Asian, like an Asian family, or being Asian yourself, right? Like sometimes we are very careful to not play into the stereotype, right? So when I was calm with them, I was being extra calm because I don't want to be the stereotype of the angry black dude, right? Even
Right.
though I might, in this situation, I might have justification to be angry, you know,
Yeah,
but
100%. Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
want to be the angry black dude, and then now you go home, and then now all of your assumptions and beliefs are now doubled down on, and now you have more good reason to believe it, right? And it's a shame. It's unfortunate that I even have to think of that way, in that way. Like, some people don't need to. If a situation makes somebody angry, some people in this world, they don't need to think of, if I express my anger, it's going to make me look like a more stereotypical this kind of person, you know. But there's some
right.
people that have to worry about, like, oh fuck, I'm actually really angry, but if I really go really angry now, they're going to be thinking, haha, you black people,
Yeah,
am I
yeah,
right? So aggressive, am I right? You know?
yeah. Like you're just playing into the stereotype
Yeah.
in their head. Yeah. No, I get you.
Just sucks.